This video is a segment of an online presentation for an anthropology course at Western Illinois University by Dr. Michael Lorenzen. This segment discusses how to think about credible sources when researching cryptozoology and archaeology topics.
Why this happens. And one of the main things is popular culture. If you're getting into a topic, a lot of this stuff is in the popular imagination. Bigfoot's more than just a monster someone sees or a large ape that someone has seen throughout the United States. It's an entertainment. It's monstertainment. There are lots of reality Bigfoot TV shows on the air that you can find. People publish books on this all the time. There's, books that prepared, are nonfiction trying to find Bigfoot. There's stuff out there that's fiction that people write. There's a whole line of Bigfoot erotica now that you can find on Amazon Kindle. There's a lot that'll come up if you're doing a search like on Bigfoot. Same thing if you're looking for some archaeology topics. The ancient apocalypse show, which is now big on Netflix, their #1 show, is a lot of pseudo-archaeology. But if you're looking for stuff on that type of topic, that's the sort of references you're going to find in many cases, is the popular culture stuff relating to that. Another reason why a lot of this is difficult is there's a great deal of what we call woo in pseudo-archaeology and then also encrypted research. And this is when people get outside the normal scientific method. We have a scientific research method where you make a hypothesis, you go out and study the evidence, and then you draw conclusions on whether or not your hypothesis was correct. And there's this whole process for finding out whether or not if something is actually valid. Finding out, getting more and better facts to get more and more closer to the truth as best as we can, particularly when we're dealing with an animal which might be hidden, or if we're dealing with things that may have happened in the past thousands of years ago. You're never going to know necessarily everything, but some things are better than others that you can know. When you get into woo, that's when people kind of throw that out. They come up with other explanations why you can't find things. So, for example, the one with some of the cryptids like the Loch Ness Monster. The reason you can't find anything on the Loch Ness Monster is that the Loch Ness Monster travels using portals in the water. It's really a time-traveling dinosaur from the past. Or you're talking about people who are talking about Bigfoot and they claim, well, UFOs deliver Bigfoot and take Bigfoot away. Now, that sounds humorous to us, but if you actually start doing research on the Loch Ness Monster or on Bigfoot, you're going to find people making these claims, and they come up very prominently when you're doing some of the searches on the web. So they can't explain scientifically why the species can't be found, or they can't explain why giant bones can't be found out in the wild, even though they claim that there used to be a civilization of giants in North America. They'll come up with things that God hid them, the bones, that they're not there. They'll come up with woo, something that you can't really test. And those, unfortunately, although they might be entertaining, are not really good for finding credible resources, valid sources, if you're doing an assignment for this class. The other thing to watch out for is there's a lot of conspiracy theories relating to cryptids and also some of the pseudo-archaeology stuff which is out there. So, for example, the reason you can't find anything on Bigfoot might be the government is covering up Bigfoot's existence. Or someone might say, well, there's all kinds of proof that Atlantis had colonies in North America, but big archaeology doesn't want you to know. They're covering it up. And that should immediately raise alarm bells when people start claiming conspiracies. Conspiracies are very difficult to pull off when you have lots of people. There are a lot of archaeologists and historians in the world, and they are in multiple sites doing locations, doing research, and there's really be difficult to keep every single one of them quiet if they found things that went against what was a normal narrative. If someone found proof, they would probably say something. Same thing, with a government conspiracy to cover up the Loch Ness Monster or to cover up the existence of Bigfoot. There are so many people that'd be involved in that, it'd be virtually impossible that someone wouldn't leak this out, because it'd be big news and you could get rich really fast if you had this information. It'd make your career. It's just not feasible, realistic that many people. A couple people can keep a conspiracy, but hundreds of thousands of people or millions in the case of scientists in some areas aren't going to be able to keep something like this quiet, even if they wanted to. So it's highly unlikely there's some sort of conspiracy. So when people use conspiracy to explain why we can't find evidence, that's another marker that this really isn't a credible way to do research, and those maybe aren't the best resources to be using. And again, I mention that because you're going to find that's very common. Even some of the TV shows you see on TV will talk about, well, the government's covering up, or science is covering up all this evidence of this, how this ancient culture died 8,000 years ago. But there's no real evidence that they're covering up other than the fact that people don't think like they think. It's really hard to find proof that there's a conspiracy. And oftentimes the fact that you can't find anything is proof that there's a conspiracy, is what they claim. So just be very careful of that kind of stuff. There's also problems with finding stuff in the scholarly literature, some of the databases I'm going to show you. That's because there's oftentimes not a lot of evidence for something. There's not a lot of evidence that there's a chupacabra running around Latin America or Puerto Rico or in Texas. So if you're looking for stuff on chupacabra, you're going to get a lot of maybe popular culture articles, but there's not a lot of scientists that have gone out and looked for chupacabra because there's been nothing that's been presented to the scientists that indicate chupacabra is real. So it's not something that they're likely to go out and do a lot of study on. So without a lot of hard evidence, a lot of indicators that something is real other than popular culture-ish, the scientists and historians or archaeologists aren't necessarily going to go and spend a lot of time following some wild goose chase type of research. Two, there is also some stigma involved in doing this kind of research. If you're a grad student, you're not going to go to your professor and say, I want to do my dissertation on Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster or on Atlantean colonies in North America. Probably not going to get approved. It's really not something that you're going to want to do research on or try to get research grant funding on. And the reason for that is because there's not much out there indicating this stuff is real. It's not a conspiracy that you're not going to be encouraged to do that. It's just that's not really a productive way to use your time as a scholar unless some other evidence comes out. And you probably don't want to make a name for yourself as the Loch Ness Monster professor. I mean, it's not really going to help your career. But all that being said, if there was evidence, something really exciting about finding the Loch Ness Monster, something that would redefine how we thought about origins of North America, in the past, most scientists or archaeologists would go for it. They're not going to try to hide it. If there's actual evidence, they're going to do it. But because there's not a lot of evidence there and there's not a lot of encouragement for it, even a little stigma for it, unless there's some real good evidence, they're not going to go for it. That's going to mean there's not a lot of scholarship published on some of these topics. There's simply not going to be some stuff that you might consider the best when you do the research. You're going to really need to think carefully about your research terms and be a little loose in what you consider some of the valid sources to be. You don't want to just, take wild, crazy claims from the web, but maybe when you're going in and doing some of the particularly the cryptid assignment, maybe some stuff talking about a creature from the existence from the point of folklore, trying to explain what people might be explaining or what they might be describing, might be considered some evidence for it. Maybe as a sub-folklore creature, as a legendary creature, maybe not necessarily a flesh and blood one. Although clearly if you can find some stuff with people arguing that, those might be good ones too. But, try to stick to some books, from mainstream publishers, maybe some journal articles. If you can't find it in a scholarly peer-reviewed literature, there might still be stuff like in the New York Times or maybe some popular news magazines, which are a little more credible than maybe some wild claims you might find on the web. Again, I'm happy to help you with any one of these topics. Find some credible sources, and I'm sure that your professor would be happy to help you too if you're not sure if he's going to accept a particular citation as a valid source as we go through here and see what things might be good and useful for this course. But it might not be as easy to find some stuff on these topics as you might normally find in some other courses dealing with some more mainstream topics. Again, that's kind of part of the fun. Just give yourself a lot of time to go in and do some of this research. Let me go ahead and bring up the library page at this point. I'm going to show you our page. Let's see, where am I at? Here we are. And